The leather-bound journal slipped from Olivia Warren's trembling fingers as the stagecoach hit another rut in the dusty California road. And before she could catch it, the book tumbled out the open window into the sage-dotted wilderness stretching endlessly toward the Sierra Nevada mountains in the distance. "No," Olivia gasped, pressing her face against the window frame, watching helplessly as her most precious possession disappeared into a cloud of dust behind them. She pounded on the roof of the coach. "Stop, please stop." But the driver either couldn't hear her over the thunder of hooves and rattling wheels or chose to ignore her plea, and the stagecoach barreled onward toward Keeler, California, leaving behind 3 years of her most intimate thoughts, hopes, and dreams scattered somewhere along that desolate stretch of road. It was July 1883, and Olivia had been writing in that diary since she turned 18, recording letters to a husband she had never met, pouring out her heart to a man who existed only in her imagination and prayers. She slumped back against the worn leather seat, fighting tears. The journal had been her companion through the loneliest years of her life in San Francisco, where she had worked as a seamstress in her aunt's dress shop after her parents died of influenza. Every night before bed she would write to him, her future husband, telling him about her day, her thoughts, her fears, and her hopes. She described the kind of man she dreamed he would be. Strong but gentle, honest, hardworking, someone who would see her not as a burden or a convenience but as a partner, a companion, someone worth cherishing. Now that journal was gone, lost somewhere in the California wilderness, and she was heading to Keeler to take a position as a schoolteacher in a town she had never seen, knowing absolutely no one. At 21 years old, she was starting her life over, and the loss of her diary felt like losing a piece of her soul. The stagecoach arrived in Keeler 3 hours later, pulling up in front of a modest hotel on the town's main street. Keeler sat in the Owens Valley, a place of stark beauty where the eastern Sierra Nevada mountains rose dramatically to the west, and the Inyo Mountains formed a barrier to the east. The town had sprung up to service the nearby silver mines and serve as a transportation hub for ore heading to Los Angeles. Dust seemed to coat everything, and the July heat shimmered off the packed earth streets. Olivia collected her 2 battered trunks and checked into the hotel, where the proprietor, a kind-faced woman named Mrs. Henderson, showed her to a small but clean room on the 2nd floor. The school board had arranged for her lodging until she could find more permanent accommodations, and classes wouldn't begin until September, giving her nearly 2 months to settle in and prepare. That first night, lying in the unfamiliar bed and listening to the sounds of an unfamiliar town, Olivia felt the absence of her journal like a physical ache. She had no way to pour out the anxiety churning in her chest, no imaginary husband to confide in about her fears of failure, of never belonging, of dying alone and unloved in this harsh, beautiful place. Meanwhile, 15 miles south along that same dusty road, a cowboy named Fletcher Ford was making camp for the night. He had spent the day rounding up stray cattle that had wandered from the ranch where he worked, a spread that ran longhorns in the foothills of the Sierra Nevada. At 24, Fletcher had been working cattle since he was old enough to sit a horse. His father had died when Fletcher was 12, killed by a spooked horse, and his mother had passed 2 years later from a broken heart and consumption. He had been on his own ever since, drifting from ranch to ranch, good with horses and cattle but never staying anywhere long enough to put down roots. He was tall and lean, with sun-darkened skin and dark hair that needed cutting. His hands were calloused from years of hard work, and his gray-green eyes held a wariness that came from too many disappointments and too much solitude. He wasn't unfriendly, but he kept people at a distance, never letting anyone close enough to matter. As he unsaddled his horse, a sturdy bay gelding named Copper, his boot kicked something half buried in the dirt near a clump of sagebrush. Fletcher bent down and pulled out a leather-bound journal, dusty and scuffed but otherwise undamaged. He brushed off the cover and opened it, squinting at the neat, feminine handwriting in the fading light. "Dear husband," the first entry began, dated 3 years earlier. "I don't know your name yet or what you look like or where you are right now, but I know you must exist somewhere. Today I turned 18, and Aunt Margaret says I should start thinking practically about marriage, but how can I think practically about something that should be about love? I want to believe that somewhere out there you are thinking of me too, even though we have not met. I want to believe that when we do meet, we will know each other, that our souls will recognize each other across whatever distance separates us now." Fletcher sat down heavily on a fallen log, the journal open in his hands. He knew he should close it, that reading a woman's private thoughts was wrong, but something in those words reached into his chest and grabbed hold of something he had thought long dead. He turned the page and kept reading. The entries spanned 3 years of a young woman's life. She wrote about working in her aunt's dress shop, about the fancy ladies who came in for fittings and treated her like she was invisible. She wrote about walking along the San Francisco waterfront on her days off, watching the ships come in and wondering if her future husband might be on one of them. She wrote about her parents, about how much she missed them, about the way her father used to read to her every night before bed, and how her mother's hands always smelled like the lavender soap she made. But mostly, she wrote about her dreams. She dreamed of a life that was simple but full of love, of a small house with a garden, of children's laughter, of growing old with someone who knew her completely and loved her anyway. She wrote about wanting to be a teacher, to give children the gift of learning that her parents had given her. She wrote about feeling invisible and longing to be seen, truly seen, by someone who mattered. Fletcher read until it was too dark to see the words, then built up his fire and continued reading by firelight. He read about how she had applied for a teaching position in a town called Keeler, how terrified she was to leave everything familiar behind, but how she couldn't bear the thought of spending the rest of her life as invisible as she had been in San Francisco. The last entry was dated just that morning, written before dawn. "Dear husband, today I leave for Keeler, California, to begin my new life as a schoolteacher. I am so frightened I can barely breathe, but I am also excited in a way I have never been before. Perhaps you are already there, waiting for me without knowing it. Perhaps you are somewhere else entirely, and our paths have not yet crossed. But I have to believe that they will cross, that this move is bringing me closer to you rather than taking me further away. I have to believe that every step I take is a step toward the life we will build together. I have to believe in you, even though I do not know you, because believing in you means believing that love is real and that I am worthy of being loved. Please be patient with me. I know I am not perfect. I know I can be too serious, too reserved, too much in my own head. But I promise that when we find each other, I will love you with everything I have. I will be faithful and true. I will stand beside you in whatever storms we face. And I will never, ever stop believing in us." Fletcher closed the journal and stared into the fire, his throat tight and his chest aching. This woman, this Olivia Warren, had poured her heart onto these pages, and somehow her words had found their way to him. He should ride into Keeler and return the journal to her. That would be the right thing to do, the decent thing. But then she would know he had read it, had seen into the most private corners of her heart, and she would be mortified. Fletcher knew he should just leave the journal at the hotel or the schoolhouse with a note saying he had found it. But the thought of simply walking away from these words, from the woman who had written them, felt impossible. He pulled a stub of pencil from his saddlebag, something he used to mark tallies when counting cattle, and opened the journal to the first blank page after her last entry. His handwriting was rough and unpracticed compared to her elegant script, but he wrote anyway. Dear Olivia, I found your journal on the road south of Keeler. I know I should not have read it, and I apologize for invading your privacy. But I want you to know that your words moved me more than I can say. You write about being invisible, but anyone who could write with such honesty and hope could never truly be invisible. You shine through every word. I hope you find what you are looking for in Keeler. I hope you find the love you deserve. And I hope that whoever he turns out to be, your future husband knows how lucky he is. Respectfully, a cowboy who found your diary. Fletcher closed the journal and sat staring at it for a long time. Then, almost against his will, he opened it again and added one more line. If you would like your journal returned, leave a message at the hotel in Keeler addressed to Fletcher Ford. I will make sure it gets back to you. He wrapped the journal carefully in an oilcloth to protect it from the dust and tucked it into his saddlebag. Tomorrow he would ride into Keeler on his day off and leave it for her. It was the right thing to do. But that night, lying in his bedroll under a canopy of stars so bright and numerous they looked like diamond dust scattered across black velvet, Fletcher could not stop thinking about Olivia Warren and her words. For the first time in years, he let himself imagine what it might be like to be the man she was writing to be someone worthy of that kind of love and devotion. For the first time in years, the loneliness that had been his constant companion felt less like an inevitable condition and more like something that could possibly change. The next morning, Fletcher rode into Keeler with the journal secure in his saddlebag. The town was bustling with activity, freight wagons heading to and from the mines, cowboys and miners mixing on the streets. He tied Copper to the hitching post outside the hotel and went inside, the journal wrapped and tucked under his arm. Mrs. Henderson looked up from the front desk with a welcoming smile. Help you with something? Yes, madam. I found something on the road that I believe belongs to one of your guests, a Miss Olivia Warren. Could you see that she gets this? Mrs. Henderson's eyes lit up with recognition. Oh yes, Miss Warren, our new schoolteacher. She has been beside herself over losing something. This must be it. I will take it right up to her. Fletcher handed over the wrapped journal, tipped his hat, and turned to leave, but Mrs. Henderson called after him. Wait just a moment. I am sure Miss Warren will want to thank you personally. That is not necessary, madam. I am just glad to return it to her. But Mrs. Henderson was already bustling up the stairs, and Fletcher found himself standing awkwardly in the hotel lobby, turning his hat in his hands and wondering if he could just leave before Olivia came down. Reading her diary was one thing, but meeting her face to face, knowing what he knew about her innermost thoughts and feelings, felt like too much. He heard footsteps on the stairs and looked up to see a young woman descending, her hand clutching the wrapped journal to her chest like it was made of gold. She was slender and fine-boned, with dark blonde hair pulled back in a simple bun and intelligent brown eyes that were currently bright with tears. She wore a practical gray traveling dress that had seen better days, and there was nothing particularly fashionable or fancy about her appearance, but something in the way she held herself, in the directness of her gaze, caught Fletcher completely off guard. You found my journal. Her voice was soft but clear, with a slight tremble that betrayed her emotion. Fletcher cleared his throat. Yes, madam. It was on the road about 15 miles south of here. Must have fallen from the stage-coach. I cannot thank you enough. I thought it was lost forever. She held the journal against her heart, her eyes searching his face. "Mrs. Henderson said your name is Fletcher Ford." "Yes, madam." There was a long moment of silence, and Fletcher saw the exact instant when recognition dawned in her eyes, when she realized that not only had he found her journal, but he had also written in it. Color flooded her cheeks, and her grip on the journal tightened. "You read it," she said quietly. It was not a question. Fletcher felt heat crawl up his own neck. "Yes, madam, I apologize. I should not have, but I started reading and I could not seem to stop. I know that was wrong of me." Olivia looked down at the journal, then back up at him. "You wrote something in it at the end." "Yes, madam. Just a note explaining how I found it and offering to return it if you wanted." "I see." She was quiet for a moment, then asked, "Did you mean what you wrote, about my words moving you?" Fletcher met her eyes and found he could not look away. "Every word, Miss Warren." Something shifted in her expression, a softening around her eyes and mouth. "Would you like some coffee, Mr. Ford? I think we should talk." That was how it began, over coffee in the hotel's small dining room, with the morning sun streaming through the windows and the sounds of the town going about its business outside. They sat across from each other at a corner table, and Olivia opened her journal to the page where Fletcher had written his note. "I should be angry with you," she said, tracing his rough handwriting with one finger. "You read my most private thoughts. I know. I would understand if you never wanted to see me again." She looked up at him, and there was something vulnerable and brave in her eyes. "But I am not angry. I feel like I should be, but mostly I just feel exposed and terrified and strangely hopeful all at the same time." "Hopeful?" Fletcher asked, his heart beating harder. Olivia took a breath. "For 3 years I have been writing to someone who did not exist, pouring out my heart to an imaginary man. And then you found my journal and you read those words and you wrote back. Even if it was just a brief note, you wrote back. Do you know how extraordinary that feels? How seen that makes me feel, even though I should probably feel mortified instead." Fletcher found himself leaning forward, drawn by her honesty. "I do know, because reading your words made me feel seen too in a way I have not felt in years, maybe ever." They talked for hours that morning, coffee growing cold in their cups as they forgot to drink it. Fletcher told her about his life as a cowboy, about losing his parents young and drifting ever since. Olivia told him about her parents' death, about feeling invisible in her aunt's shop, about the courage it had taken to apply for the teaching position in Keeler. "I have been so lonely," Olivia admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I know I should not say that it makes me sound pathetic, but it is the truth. I have been surrounded by people but completely alone." "I know exactly what you mean," Fletcher said. "I work with men every day, but I do not really know them, and they do not really know me. It is easier that way, or at least I thought it was." "What changed?" Olivia asked. Fletcher tapped the journal lying on the table between them. "This. You, reading your words reminded me that easier is not the same as better. That keeping everyone at a distance means never having to risk getting hurt, but it also means never having anything real." Olivia's eyes shimmered with tears. "I wrote those entries never imagining anyone would read them. If I had known, I would have been too self-conscious, too careful. But because I thought I was writing into a void, I told the truth, and somehow, impossibly, the truth found you." "Maybe it was supposed to," Fletcher heard himself say, and immediately felt foolish. "I am sorry, that sounds ridiculous." "No," Olivia said quickly. "No, it does not sound ridiculous at all." They sat in silence for a moment, something fragile and precious suspended between them. Then Olivia asked, "What happens now?" Fletcher had been asking himself the same question. The smart thing, the safe thing, would be to walk away right now, to return to his life at the ranch and let Olivia settle into her new position as schoolteacher. They barely knew each other. One conversation, no matter how honest, was not enough to build anything lasting on. But he had spent his whole adult life doing the smart, safe thing, keeping his heart locked away where it could not be broken again, and where had it gotten him? Nowhere. Just more years of loneliness stretching ahead like an empty road. "I would like to see you again," Fletcher said. "If that would be all right with you." A smile spread across Olivia's face, transforming it from merely pretty to genuinely beautiful. "I would like that very much." Over the following weeks, Fletcher found reasons to ride into Keeler whenever he could. He would help Olivia carry supplies for the schoolhouse, which needed significant repairs before it would be ready for students. He would bring his tools and spend his days off fixing broken windows, patching the roof, building new desks and benches from lumber donated by the sawmill. Olivia would work beside him, scrubbing floors and walls, arranging books, preparing lesson plans. They talked as they worked, sharing stories and dreams and fears. Fletcher told her about breaking his first horse, about the time he got caught in a blizzard in the mountains and nearly froze to death, about the guilt he still carried over his mother's death, the sense that if he had been older, stronger, better, he could have saved her somehow. Olivia told him about the dress shop in San Francisco, about the wealthy women who treated her like furniture, about her fear that she was not smart enough or experienced enough to be a good teacher, about her recurring nightmare that she would stand in front of a classroom and open her mouth, and no words would come out. "You will be an excellent teacher," Fletcher assured her as they painted the schoolhouse walls a fresh white one Saturday in early August. "You have more knowledge and compassion in your little finger than most people have in their whole body." Olivia paused, her paintbrush dripping. "How can you possibly know that? You have known me less than a month." "I read your diary, remember? I know how you think, how you see the world, and I have been watching you prepare for these students. You care so much, Olivia. That is what will make you great at this." She set down her paintbrush and crossed to where he stood by the window. "Can I ask you something? Anything? When you first read my diary before you knew me at all, what did you think? Honestly." Fletcher considered the question carefully. "Honestly, I thought you were the bravest person I had ever encountered. You put your whole heart on those pages, knowing they might never be read, might never matter to anyone. You chose hope over cynicism, vulnerability over safety. And I thought that whoever ended up being your husband would be the luckiest man alive." Tears spilled down Olivia's cheeks, but she was smiling. "And now? What do you think now?" Fletcher set down his own paintbrush and took her hands in his, not caring that they were both covered in paint. "Now I think I want to be that man, if you will have me. I know it is too soon. I know we should wait and be practical, but I do not want to waste any more time being safe and lonely when I could be taking a chance on something real." "Fletcher," Olivia whispered, squeezing his hands. "I have been in love with you since you wrote that note in my diary. No, since before that. Since I read your words and recognized something essential in them, something that matched something essential in me. But I did not dare hope you might feel the same way." "I do," Fletcher said, his voice rough with emotion. "I feel exactly the same way. You are not invisible to me, Olivia. You are the clearest, brightest thing in my life." He kissed her then, soft and gentle at first, then deeper as she responded, her paint-stained hands coming up to cup his face. It was not Olivia's first kiss, but it was the first one that mattered, the first one that felt like coming home. They pulled apart slowly, both breathing hard, and Olivia laughed a little shakily. "We have paint all over each other now." "I do not care," Fletcher said, and kissed her again. They courted properly after that, despite Fletcher's impulsive declaration. Fletcher wanted to do things right, to give Olivia the kind of courtship she deserved. He would ride into town every Sunday after church, which he started attending again specifically to see her, and they would walk together along the paths that led out into the valley, talking and occasionally stopping to steal a kiss when no one was watching. The town noticed, of course. Mrs. Henderson noticed first, having observed their initial meeting and watched their growing attachment with approving eyes. Soon everyone in Keeler knew that the new schoolteacher and Fletcher Ford, that quiet cowboy who kept to himself, were courting. Most people approved. Olivia had made a good impression on the townspeople with her dedication to preparing the school and her genuine warmth when she interacted with the local families. Fletcher was known as a hard-working, honest man, even if he was reserved. They seemed like a good match. The school board, a group of 5 men who oversaw education in the area, had some concerns about whether a young woman in love could maintain proper discipline and focus in the classroom. But when they met with Olivia to discuss their worries, she assured them with such calm confidence that her personal life would not interfere with her professional responsibilities that they left satisfied. They basically asked me if I was going to be too distracted by courting you to do my job properly, Olivia told Fletcher later, indignant. As if women are not capable of thinking about more than one thing at a time, Fletcher grinned. What did you tell them? I told them that I have been preparing for this position my entire adult life, that I take my responsibilities seriously, and that having someone who supports and believes in me will only make me better at my job, not worse. She paused. I did not mention that I think about you approximately every 3 minutes when we are apart. Only every 3 minutes. I think about you constantly, Fletcher admitted. I am becoming useless at work. Yesterday I spent 20 minutes staring at a fence post because it reminded me of you. How does a fence post remind you of me? I have no idea. That is how far gone I am. Olivia laughed, that clear, bright sound that Fletcher had come to treasure more than anything. They were sitting on a blanket near a creek that ran through the valley, having a picnic lunch that Olivia had packed. It was late August, and school would start in just over a week. The summer heat was finally beginning to ease slightly, though the days were still warm. Fletcher, Olivia said, her tone turning more serious. Where do you see this going? Us, I mean. Fletcher took her hand, lacing his fingers through hers. I see it going exactly where I told you that day at the schoolhouse. I want to marry you, Olivia. I want to build a life with you. I know we have not been courting very long, but I am more certain of this than I have been of anything in my life. I am certain too, Olivia said quietly, but I need to establish myself as a teacher first. I need to prove that I can do this job, that I am not just the woman who came to town and immediately got married and gave it all up. Does that make sense? It makes perfect sense, Fletcher assured her. I am not going anywhere. We can take whatever time you need. Maybe by Christmas. Olivia suggested, her cheeks flushing. That would give me a full semester to prove myself, and then we could marry during the winter break. Christmas sounds perfect, Fletcher said and kissed her soundly. School began the first week of September with 15 students ranging in age from 6 to 14. Olivia threw herself into teaching with passion and dedication, and within the first month, it was clear that the town had chosen well. She had a gift for making learning engaging and accessible, for seeing each student as an individual with unique strengths and challenges. She was firm but kind, maintaining discipline without being harsh, encouraging curiosity and critical thinking. Fletcher watched her thrive with a pride that sometimes threatened to overwhelm him. He continued working at the ranch, but he was saving every penny he could, planning for their future. He talked to his boss about the possibility of taking on more responsibility, maybe eventually working his way up to foreman. He wanted to be able to provide for Olivia, to give her a home she could be proud of. In early October, Fletcher approached the owner of the ranch, a gruff but fair man named Samuel Hart, about his long-term prospects. "I am planning to get married in December," Fletcher told him, "and I want to know if there is any future for me here beyond just being a ranch hand. I am willing to work hard, learn whatever I need to learn, but I need to know if I can build a life here or if I should start looking elsewhere." Samuel leaned back in his chair, studying Fletcher with shrewd eyes. "You are a good worker, Ford. Best hand I have had in years. You are reliable, skilled, and you do not cause trouble. I have been thinking about bringing on a foreman to help manage the operation, someone who knows cattle and horses and can handle men. The pay would be $60 a month, plus you would get a small house on the property. Would that interest you?" $60 a month was more than Fletcher had ever made. As a regular ranch hand, he earned $35 a month, which was standard pay. $60 plus a house would mean he and Olivia could start their married life with actual security. "Yes, sir, that would interest me very much," Fletcher said, keeping his voice steady despite the excitement surging through him. "Good. You start the new position on December 1st. That should give you time to get married and move your new wife into the house. It needs some fixing up, but it is sound." Fletcher rode into town that evening, unable to wait until Sunday to tell Olivia the news. He found her at the schoolhouse, grading papers by lamplight, and she looked up with surprise and delight when he came through the door. "Fletcher, I was not expecting you until Sunday. I know, but I could not wait to tell you." He swept her up in his arms, spinning her around. "I got a promotion, foreman position, $60 a month, and we get a house." Olivia's face lit up with joy. "Oh, Fletcher, that is wonderful. I am so proud of you." They spent the evening making plans, talking about the future with an excitement they had not allowed themselves before. Now it was real, tangible. They would marry on December 20th, giving Olivia time to finish the semester and Fletcher time to prepare the house. They would have a small ceremony at the church with the townspeople invited, and then they would move into their new home and start their life together. "I never imagined I could be this happy," Olivia said later as they sat together on the schoolhouse steps, looking up at the stars. "A year ago, I was invisible and alone in San Francisco, writing letters to a husband I thought I would never find. And now here you are, real and wonderful, and we are planning our wedding." "Your diary found me," Fletcher said, pulling her close. "Or maybe I found it. Either way, it brought us together, and I will be grateful for that for the rest of my life." "I am going to keep writing in it," Olivia said. "But now, instead of writing to an imaginary future husband, I will be writing about my actual husband, about you, about us." "Can I still write in it sometimes?" Fletcher asked. "I liked having that conversation with you on the page before we ever spoke out loud." "I would love that," Olivia said, and kissed him under the California stars. The next 2 months passed in a blur of preparation and anticipation. Fletcher worked long hours at the ranch, learning his new responsibilities and fixing up the house. It was a modest 2-room structure with a main room that served as kitchen and living space and a bedroom. It had a wood stove, a fireplace, a well nearby, and a small barn for horses. Fletcher patched the roof, replaced broken windows, built a proper bed frame and a kitchen table with chairs. Other ranch hands helped him, glad to see him settling down and touched by his obvious devotion to his future wife. Olivia continued teaching while also preparing for the wedding. Mrs. Henderson helped her sew a wedding dress, a simple but elegant gown of cream-colored cotton with lace at the collar and cuffs. The townswomen organized a small reception to be held at the hotel after the ceremony, insisting they wanted to celebrate their schoolteacher's happiness. On a cold December Sunday, 2 weeks before the wedding, Olivia and Fletcher sat together in the church after services, discussing final details. Most of the congregation had left, and they had a rare moment of privacy in the quiet sanctuary. "Are you nervous?" Olivia asked, her hand in Fletcher's. "About marrying you, not even a little. About being a good husband, a good provider, about being worthy of you, terrified." Olivia turned to face him fully. "Fletcher Ford, you are the best man I have ever known. You are kind and honest and hardworking. You see me, really see me, in a way no one else ever has. You are not just worthy of me, I am not sure I am worthy of you." "That is ridiculous," Fletcher said immediately. "Olivia, you are extraordinary. You are brilliant and brave and compassionate. I am just a cowboy who got lucky enough to find your diary." "You are not just anything," Olivia said firmly, "and I need you to stop thinking of yourself that way. You are the man I love, the man I have chosen to spend my life with, and you need to see yourself the way I see you." Fletcher pulled her into his arms, holding her close. "I will try. For you, I will try." They sat together in the peaceful church, talking quietly about their hopes for the future. They wanted children, though they agreed to wait at least a year to let Olivia continue teaching and for them to get settled in their marriage. They talked about eventually saving enough to buy their own small piece of land, maybe running a few head of cattle of their own. They talked about growing old together, about building a life full of love and purpose and meaning. "Sometimes I cannot believe this is real," Olivia whispered. "Sometimes I am afraid I will wake up and discover this has all been a dream." "It is real," Fletcher assured her. "I am real, and you are real, and we are really going to get married in 2 weeks." December 20th dawned clear and cold, the kind of winter day where the sun shines bright but provides little warmth. Fletcher had barely slept the night before, too excited and nervous to rest. He dressed in the new suit he had purchased for the occasion, a dark blue wool suit that had cost him nearly a month's wages but was worth it. He wanted to look his best for Olivia. The church filled with townspeople, ranchers, miners, families with children. Olivia had made an impact on the community in her few months in Keeler, and people were genuinely happy to see her marry. Fletcher stood at the front of the church with the minister, his heart pounding so hard he was sure everyone could hear it. Then the door opened, and Olivia appeared on Mrs. Henderson's arm. She had no father to walk her down the aisle, so Mrs. Henderson, who had become something of a surrogate mother to her, had offered to give her away. Olivia looked beautiful in her cream-colored dress, her dark blonde hair pinned up with small white flowers woven through it. But it was her face that took Fletcher's breath away. She was radiant with happiness, her eyes locked on his, her smile bright enough to light the whole valley. She walked slowly down the aisle, and Fletcher had to force himself not to run to her, to meet her halfway. When she finally reached him, Mrs. Henderson placed Olivia's hand in his, and the rightness of it, the way her small hand fit perfectly in his larger one, made Fletcher's throat tight with emotion. The minister began the ceremony, the familiar words washing over them. Fletcher barely heard them, too focused on Olivia's face, on the tears of joy sliding down her cheeks, on the way she was looking at him like he hung the moon. When it came time for the vows, Fletcher's voice was steady and sure. "I, Fletcher, take you, Olivia, to be my lawfully wedded wife. I promise to love you, honor you, and cherish you for all the days of my life. I promise to stand beside you in joy and sorrow, in plenty and want, in sickness and health. I promise to see you always, and to never let you feel invisible again. You are my heart, my home, and my hope for the future." Olivia's tears were flowing freely now as she spoke her own vows. "I, Olivia, take you, Fletcher, to be my lawfully wedded husband. I promise to love you, honor you, and cherish you for all the days of my life. I promise to be your partner and companion, your comfort, and your strength. I promise to believe in you always, and to build with you a life full of love and meaning. You found me when I was lost, and I will spend the rest of my life being grateful for that gift." They exchanged simple gold bands that Fletcher had special ordered from a jeweler in Los Angeles, and then the minister pronounced them husband and wife. "You may kiss your bride," he said with a smile, and Fletcher did, pouring every ounce of love and promise and hope he possessed into that kiss while the congregation cheered and applauded. They walked back down the aisle together as husband and wife, and Fletcher felt like his heart might actually burst with happiness. This woman, this extraordinary woman who had poured her heart into a diary and somehow sent it to him across miles of California wilderness, was his wife. He was her husband. They belonged to each other now, and nothing would ever separate them. The reception at the hotel was loud and joyful, full of good food and laughter and dancing. Fletcher, who had never been much of a dancer, stumbled through several dances with Olivia, stepping on her toes more than once and making her laugh until she could barely breathe. "We should practice," Olivia gasped between giggles after Fletcher nearly sent them both crashing into another couple. "Maybe in private where you cannot injure innocent bystanders." "I would be happy to never dance again," Fletcher said, but he was grinning. "Except with you. I will dance with you any time you want, even if I am terrible at it." As the evening wore on, and the sun set, Fletcher and Olivia finally slipped away from the reception and rode out to the ranch in a wagon loaded with Olivia's belongings. Fletcher had already moved his few possessions into the house earlier in the week. The stars were coming out as they drove, and Olivia leaned against Fletcher's shoulder, exhausted but happy. "Mrs. Fletcher Ford," she said softly, testing out her new name. "That is going to take some getting used to." "You do not have to change your name if you do not want to," Fletcher said. "I know some women keep their own names now." "I want to," Olivia assured him. "I want to be Mrs. Ford. I want everyone to know I am yours and you are mine." They reached the house just as full darkness fell, and Fletcher carried Olivia over the threshold, both of them laughing at the clumsiness of it. He set her down gently in the main room, and she looked around at the home he had prepared for her. He had cleaned everything until it shone, had built furniture with his own hands, had even attempted to make curtains for the windows, though they were crooked and uneven. "You made curtains?" Olivia's voice was soft with wonder as she examined them. "I tried. They are not very good." "They are perfect," Olivia said, turning to him with shining eyes. "Everything is perfect. You made this a home for us, Fletcher. Thank you." He pulled her into his arms, suddenly nervous in a way he had not been even during the ceremony. "Olivia, I need you to know something. I do not have a lot of experience with, well." She put her finger over his lips, silencing him. "Neither do I. We will figure it out together. That is what marriage is, right? Figuring things out together." Fletcher kissed her then, soft and sweet at first, then deeper as she responded. They had been careful during their courtship, never allowing themselves to be fully alone or to let their kisses become too passionate. But now they were married, and there was no need for restraint anymore. They could finally be fully honest about the desire that had been building between them for months. That night they learned each other, tentative and gentle and ultimately joyful. They were both inexperienced, both nervous, but they loved each other, and that love made everything right. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the bed Fletcher had built, Olivia's head on his chest, his arms wrapped around her. "I love you," Olivia whispered into the darkness. "I loved you before I met you, when you were just words in my diary. But what I feel now is so much bigger than what I felt then. You are everything I dreamed of and so much more." "I love you too," Fletcher said, his voice rough with emotion. "And I promise you, Olivia, I will spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret choosing me." "I could never regret this," Olivia assured him. "Never." They fell asleep like that, wrapped in each other's arms, and Fletcher thought that if he died right then, he would die the happiest man who had ever lived. Their first months of marriage were an adjustment as they learned to navigate living together, sharing space, merging their lives. Olivia continued teaching while Fletcher worked as foreman, and their schedules did not always align perfectly. There were mornings when Fletcher had to leave before dawn for work in the far pastures and would not return until after dark. There were evenings when Olivia was so exhausted from teaching and grading papers that she fell asleep immediately after supper. But there were also Sunday mornings when they could sleep late, wrapped in each other's warmth. There were evenings when Fletcher would come home to find Olivia cooking supper, and they would sit at the table he had built and talk about their days. There were nights when they would sit by the fire, Olivia grading papers while Fletcher mended tack, simply enjoying each other's presence. In February, Fletcher came home one evening to find Olivia sitting at the table with her diary open in front of her, writing intently. She looked up when he came in, her face glowing with happiness. "I was just writing about us," she said. "About how strange and wonderful it is to be writing about a husband I actually have instead of one I am imagining." Fletcher hung up his coat and hat and came to sit beside her. "Can I read what you wrote?" Olivia turned the diary toward him, and he read her neat handwriting. "My dear husband Fletcher, you have been my husband for nearly 2 months now, and I am still amazed every single day that you are real, that this life we are building is real. Today, one of my students, a little girl named Emma who struggles with reading, finally understood the concept of sounding out words, and her face lit up with such joy and pride. I wanted to tell you about it immediately, wanted to share that moment with you. It made me realize that the best part of marriage is not the grand gestures or the big moments, but the simple act of having someone to share everything with, someone who cares about the small victories and mundane details of your day. Thank you for being that person for me. Thank you for seeing me always." Fletcher looked up from the diary, his throat tight. "Can I write something?" Olivia handed him the pencil, and Fletcher wrote below her entry in his rough, unpracticed script. "My dear wife Olivia, I am the luckiest man alive. Every day I get to come home to you, and every day I am grateful for the chance I took when I wrote in your diary that first time. You are my home, my heart, and my happiness. I love you more than words can express, but I will keep trying to express it anyway, for the rest of our lives. Your husband, Fletcher." Olivia read his words and promptly burst into tears. Fletcher pulled her into his lap, alarmed. "What is wrong? Did I say something wrong?" "No, you fool," Olivia said, laughing through her tears. "You said everything right. I am just so happy I cannot contain it." They started a tradition after that, passing the diary back and forth, writing entries to each other. Sometimes they wrote about important events, but more often they wrote about small moments. The way the sunrise looked over the mountains, a joke one of the ranch hands told, a breakthrough with a difficult student. The diary became a conversation between them, a place where they could be completely honest and vulnerable with each other. Spring came to the Owens Valley, bringing wildflowers and green grass and warmer weather. Olivia's first year of teaching was nearly complete, and the school board had already asked her to return for the following year, praising her dedication and skill. Fletcher was thriving in his new role as foreman, earning the respect of the men he supervised and the trust of his boss. In April, Olivia began feeling unwell. She was tired all the time, nauseous in the mornings, and her monthly cycle had stopped. She suspected what it meant but did not want to say anything to Fletcher until she was certain. She visited the town doctor, a gruff but kind man named Dr. Harrison, who confirmed her suspicions. "You are about 2 months along, Mrs. Ford. Baby should come sometime in late October or early November. Congratulations." Olivia walked out of the doctor's office in a daze. She and Fletcher had agreed to wait at least a year before having children, but apparently their bodies had other plans. She was nervous about how Fletcher would react, worried that he might feel trapped or overwhelmed. They had only been married 4 months. Were they ready for this? But when she told him that evening, Fletcher's face split into the biggest smile she had ever seen. He picked her up and spun her around, then immediately set her down carefully, as if she might break. "Are you happy?" Olivia asked anxiously. "I know we said we would wait." "I am thrilled," Fletcher assured her. "Terrified but thrilled. We are going to have a baby, Olivia. A child. A family." "We are going to be parents," Olivia said, the reality sinking in. "Oh goodness, we are going to be responsible for another human being." They stood together in their small house, holding each other and contemplating the enormity of what was coming. That night, Olivia wrote in her diary, "Dear Fletcher, we are going to be parents. I am scared and excited and overwhelmed, but mostly I am grateful that I get to do this with you. Thank you for being so happy about this surprise. I love you." Fletcher wrote back, "Dear Olivia, I cannot believe we made a baby. I cannot believe I get to be a father. I promise you, I will do everything in my power to be a good father, to be the kind of father my child deserves. And I will take care of you always. I love you and our baby already." Olivia finished out the school year, though the last few weeks were challenging as her morning sickness persisted and her energy flagged. The school board agreed that she should take the following year off to have the baby and recover, and they would hire a temporary teacher for the year with the understanding that Olivia's position would be waiting for her when she was ready to return. Summer was hot and uncomfortable for Olivia as her belly grew. Fletcher was attentive and protective, almost comically so. He would not let her lift anything heavy, insisted she rest frequently, and worried constantly that she was not eating enough or was working too hard. "I am pregnant, not fragile," Olivia told him one evening in July after he had literally carried her to a chair because she mentioned her feet hurt. "Women have been having babies since the beginning of time. I am not going to break." "I know, but you are my wife, and that is my baby, and I am going to make sure you are both safe and healthy." Olivia softened at the anxiety in his eyes. "We are safe and healthy. Dr. Harrison says everything is progressing normally, but I appreciate how much you care." In August, they found out they were having a boy. Dr. Harrison could tell by the way Olivia was carrying, he said, and he had delivered enough babies over the years that his predictions were usually accurate. Fletcher was overjoyed at the prospect of a son, though he had assured Olivia repeatedly that he would be equally happy with a daughter. They argued playfully about names. Olivia liked traditional names like William or Thomas. Fletcher preferred less common names, though he could not articulate exactly what he wanted. They finally agreed on Owen Fletcher Ford, Owen being a nod to the Owens Valley where they had met and built their life, and Fletcher as a middle name so their son would carry a piece of his father. Owen arrived on October 28, 1884, after a long and difficult labor that terrified Fletcher and exhausted Olivia. Fletcher paced outside their bedroom while Dr. Harrison and Mrs. Henderson attended to Olivia, and he was certain with every cry of pain that echoed through the house that he was going to lose her, that he had been a fool to think he could have something this good without paying a terrible price for it. But then Dr. Harrison opened the door, smiling broadly, and said, "Congratulations, Mr. Ford. You have a healthy son and your wife is doing fine. You can come meet him now." Fletcher stumbled into the bedroom to find Olivia propped up on pillows, looking exhausted but radiant, with a tiny bundle wrapped in blankets in her arms. She looked up at him with tears streaming down her face. "Fletcher, meet our son. Meet Owen." Fletcher approached slowly, his legs feeling weak. He looked down at the baby, at the tiny red face and the shock of dark hair and the impossibly small fingers curled into fists, and something in his chest cracked wide open. This was his son. His and Olivia's. This tiny, perfect human being was theirs to love and protect and raise. "Can I hold him?" Fletcher asked, his voice barely a whisper. Olivia carefully transferred the baby into Fletcher's arms, showing him how to support Owen's head. Fletcher held his son, marveling at how light he was, how fragile. Owen's eyes opened briefly, unfocused but seemingly looking right at Fletcher, and Fletcher felt a surge of love so powerful it almost brought him to his knees. "Hello, Owen," he whispered. "I am your father. I promise I am going to do my very best to be a good one. I promise I am going to love you and protect you and teach you everything I know. And I promise I am going to love your mother every single day, so you always know what real love looks like." Owen made a small sound, almost like a sigh, and nestled into Fletcher's chest. Olivia watched them, her husband and her son, and felt a completeness she had never imagined possible. This was her family. This was her life, and it was more beautiful than anything she had ever written in her diary. The first few months with a newborn were exhausting and overwhelming. Owen was colicky and cried frequently, and neither Fletcher nor Olivia had any experience with babies. They stumbled through diaper changes and middle-of-the-night feedings, learning as they went. Fletcher took on more responsibilities around the house, so Olivia could rest when Owen slept. And Olivia tried to be patient with herself as her body healed and adjusted to motherhood. There were moments of frustration and exhaustion, nights when they were both so tired they could barely speak to each other. But there were also moments of profound joy. Owen's first smile, the way he would calm immediately when Fletcher held him, the peaceful mornings when all three of them would snuggle together in bed as the sun rose. In December, on their first wedding anniversary, Fletcher and Olivia had a rare evening alone. Mrs. Henderson had offered to watch Owen for a few hours, insisting they needed time together. They went back to the church where they had been married exactly 1 year earlier and sat in the same pew where they had discussed their wedding plans. 1 year, Olivia said softly. "It feels like both forever and no time at all." "It has been the best year of my life," Fletcher said. "Even with the sleepless nights and the dirty diapers and all the chaos, best year ever." "Mine too," Olivia agreed. She pulled out her diary, which she had brought with her. "I wrote something for you this morning for our anniversary." She opened to a marked page and read aloud. "Dear Fletcher, 1 year ago today, I stood in front of this church and promised to love you for the rest of my life. I meant those words then, but I did not fully understand what they would come to mean. This year has taught me that love is not just grand gestures and passionate declarations. Love is waking up at 3 in the morning to help with a crying baby when you have to be at work at dawn. Love is building a cradle with your own hands because you want your son to sleep in something made with love. Love is the way you look at me, even when I am exhausted and covered in spit up and have not washed my hair in days, like I am still the most beautiful thing you have ever seen. Love is choosing each other every single day, even when it is hard, especially when it is hard. Thank you for choosing me, Fletcher. Thank you for being exactly the man I wrote to in this diary before I knew you existed. Thank you for finding me. I love you more today than I did a year ago, and I will love you more tomorrow than I do today. Forever yours, Olivia." Fletcher took the diary from her hands, his eyes shining with tears. He wrote his own entry, then handed it back to her. Olivia read, "Dear Olivia, 1 year ago I married my best friend, my partner, my heart. You have given me everything I never knew I needed. A home, a family, a purpose beyond just surviving. You have made me believe that I deserve good things, that I am capable of being the kind of man worthy of a woman like you. I do not have fancy words like you do, but I can tell you this. I wake up every morning grateful, and I go to sleep every night thankful. Grateful for you, for Owen, for this life we are building together. Thankful that a diary fell out of a stagecoach window and found its way to me. I will love you until I take my last breath, and if there is anything after that, I will love you there too. Forever yours, Fletcher." They held each other in the quiet church, and Olivia felt the truth of what she had written. Love was not just the butterflies and excitement of new romance, though those were wonderful. Love was also this: sitting quietly with someone who knew you completely and loved you anyway, choosing to build a life together day by day, moment by moment. The years that followed brought both challenges and joys. Owen grew from a fussy baby into a sweet, curious toddler, and then into an energetic boy who idolized his father and followed him everywhere when Fletcher was home. In 1887, when Owen was nearly 3, Olivia gave birth to their second child, a daughter they named Sarah. 2 years after that came another son, James, and then in 1892, a second daughter, Clara. Fletcher thrived as foreman, and eventually Samuel Hart offered to sell him a piece of the ranch, 100 acres with good water and grazing. Fletcher and Olivia saved every penny they could, and in 1893 they were able to buy the land and start building their own herd. It was hard work, and there were lean years when drought or falling cattle prices made them wonder if they would lose everything, but they persevered. Olivia returned to teaching part-time once the children were all in school, teaching reading and arithmetic to the youngest students 3 days a week. She loved being back in the classroom, loved helping young minds discover the joy of learning. The school board was thrilled to have her back, and the parents trusted her completely with their children. Through it all, Fletcher and Olivia continued their tradition of writing to each other in the diary. The entries were less frequent as their lives grew busier, but they still made time to share their thoughts and feelings on the page. They wrote about the pride they felt watching their children grow, about the fears that kept them up at night, about the dreams they still had for the future. On their 10th anniversary in December 1893, they threw a party at their new house, which was larger than the original foreman's house, with room for their growing family. Friends and neighbors came from miles around to celebrate, and the house was full of laughter and music and joy. Late in the evening, after most of the guests had left and the children were asleep, Fletcher and Olivia stood on their front porch, looking out at the land they now owned. The stars were brilliant overhead and the air was cold and crisp. 10 years, Olivia marveled. We have 4 children, our own land, a home we built together. Sometimes I still cannot believe this is my life. Do you ever regret it? Fletcher asked. Giving up your dreams of being a full-time teacher to have a family? Olivia turned to him, cupping his face in her hands. Fletcher Ford, I did not give up my dreams. I found new ones, bigger ones. I am a teacher and a mother and a wife and a rancher's partner. I am more than I ever imagined I could be, and that is because of you, because of us. I have never regretted a single moment. Not even the time Owen got into the chicken coop and let all the chickens out and it took us 3 days to catch them all, Olivia laughed. Okay, maybe I regretted that moment a little, but overall, no regrets. Fletcher pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her. I love you, Olivia Ford. I loved you when you were just words in a diary. I loved you the day we met. I loved you the day we married. and I love you more now than I have ever loved you before." "I love you too," Olivia whispered, "always and forever." They stood together under the stars, the same stars that had witnessed their first kiss, their wedding, the births of their children, all the moments big and small that had made up their life together. And Fletcher thought about that day nearly 11 years ago when he had kicked a dusty journal in the dirt and made the decision to pick it up and read it. That single moment had changed everything, had given him a life beyond anything he could have imagined. Inside the house, in a place of honor on the mantel, sat the original diary, now joined by several others. They had filled that first journal years ago and had started new ones, but they kept them all, a record of their love story written in their own hands. Someday, when they were old and gray, they would sit with their children and grandchildren and tell them the story of how they met, how a diary fell from a stagecoach and landed in front of a lonely cowboy who decided to write back to the woman who had written it. But that was far in the future. For now they had their life to live, their children to raise, their land to work, and their love to nurture. And that was more than enough. The years continued to pass, bringing changes and challenges but also deep contentment. Owen grew into a tall, strong young man who shared his father's skill with horses and his mother's love of books. At 18, he took over much of the day-to-day running of the ranch, allowing Fletcher to slow down a bit, though Fletcher never truly retired. Sarah, who had inherited her mother's quick mind and her father's determination, announced at 16 that she wanted to become a teacher like her mother, and Olivia worked with her to prepare for the examination that would certify her. James was the quiet one, thoughtful and artistic, always sketching the landscape and the animals. He talked about maybe going to San Francisco to study art, and though Fletcher worried about him leaving, he supported his son's dreams. Clara, the baby of the family, was wild and fearless, always getting into mischief and keeping everyone on their toes. In 1903, on their 20th anniversary, Fletcher and Olivia took a rare trip away from the ranch, just the two of them. They rode out to the place where Fletcher had found Olivia's diary 20 years earlier, a spot they had visited several times over the years. They spread a blanket and had a picnic, much like they had done during their courtship. 20 years, Fletcher said, shaking his head in wonder. Where did the time go? Into gray hair and laugh lines and 4 children and more memories than I can count, Olivia said, leaning against his shoulder. Look at us, Fletcher. We are middle-aged now. When did that happen? You are still the most beautiful woman I have ever seen, Fletcher said, and meant it. Olivia's hair was streaked with gray now, and there were lines around her eyes and mouth, but to Fletcher she was as lovely as the day he had first seen her walking down the aisle of the church toward him. And you are still the handsomest cowboy in California, Olivia replied, running her fingers through his hair, which had gone completely gray at the temples. But more than that, you are still my best friend. After 20 years of marriage, 4 children, droughts and hard times and good times, you are still the person I most want to talk to, the person whose opinion matters most, the person who makes me laugh. Fletcher pulled out something from his saddlebag, the original diary, now worn and faded. I brought this. I thought we could read some of the old entries, remember where we started. They spent the afternoon reading passages from the diary, laughing at some, crying at others. They read Olivia's hopeful entries from before they met, Fletcher's first tentative note to her, their early letters to each other as they fell in love. They read about Owen's birth, about the struggles of the early years, about the joys and sorrows that had shaped their life together. I meant every word I wrote, Olivia said as they reached the more recent entries. Every promise I made to you in these pages, I have tried my best to keep. And you have, Fletcher assured her. "You have been everything you promised and more. You have been my partner, my comfort, my strength. You have given me a family, a home, a reason to get up every morning." Olivia took the diary and wrote a new entry. "Dear Fletcher, 20 years ago today we stood before God and our community and promised to love each other forever. We had no idea what forever would actually entail, what challenges we would face, what joys we would experience. If I could go back and tell my younger self what was coming, I would tell her not to be afraid. I would tell her that the cowboy who found her diary would be everything she hoped for and more. I would tell her that love is not always easy, but it is always worth it. I would tell her that she would never regret taking the risk of opening her heart. And I would tell her that 20 years later, she would still wake up every morning grateful for the life she built with the man she loves. Thank you, Fletcher, for 20 years of love. Here is to at least 20 more." Fletcher read her words, then took the pencil and added his own. "Dear Olivia, I am not good with words like you are, so I will just say this. Finding your diary was the best thing that ever happened to me. Marrying you was the smartest decision I ever made. Building this life with you has been the greatest honor of my life. I love you today as much as I loved you 20 years ago, and I will love you until I take my last breath. You are my heart, my home, and my happiness. Forever yours, Fletcher." They sat together in the place where their story had begun, holding hands and watching the sun set over the Sierra Nevada. The years had changed them, had left their marks in gray hair and worn hands and bodies that moved more slowly than they once did, but the love between them had only deepened and strengthened. They had built something real and lasting, something worth all the struggle and sacrifice. As darkness fell and the stars began to appear, Fletcher and Olivia packed up their picnic and mounted their horses for the ride home. Their children would be waiting for them, probably with stories of minor disasters and small triumphs from the day. There would be dishes to wash and animals to feed, and 1,000 small tasks that made up the fabric of their daily life. But for now, in this moment, there was just the two of them, riding side by side under the stars, the diary safe in Fletcher's saddlebag, a testament to the power of hope and the possibility of love finding its way across impossible distances. When they reached home, the house was lit up from within, welcoming them back. Owen came out to help with the horses. Sarah called from the kitchen that she had kept supper warm. James showed them a new sketch he had finished, and Clara launched into an elaborate story about something that had happened with the neighbor's dog. Fletcher and Olivia exchanged a glance over the chaos, a glance that said everything without words. This was their life, noisy and imperfect and absolutely precious. This was what they had built together, what they had promised each other in those diary entries so many years ago. That night, after the children had all gone to bed and the house was finally quiet, Fletcher and Olivia sat together by the fire. Olivia was mending one of James's shirts, and Fletcher was reading the newspaper, but mostly they were just enjoying each other's company, the comfortable silence of two people who had been together so long they did not always need words. "Fletcher," Olivia said after a while. "Yes." "Thank you for finding my diary. Thank you for reading it even though you should not have. Thank you for writing back. Thank you for taking a chance on me." Fletcher set down his newspaper and pulled Olivia into his arms. "Olivia, I did not take a chance on you. You were the surest thing I have ever known. From the moment I read your first entry, I knew. I did not know exactly what I knew, but I knew it mattered, that you mattered. And I have been grateful every single day since for whatever twist of fate made that diary fall out of that stagecoach window at exactly the right time for me to find it." "Do you think it was fate?" Olivia asked. Or just coincidence? Does it matter? Either way, it brought us together. Either way, we found each other. And that is all that matters. They sat together by the fire until it burned low, talking quietly about their children, about plans for the ranch, about the future. Eventually, they went to bed, and Fletcher held Olivia as they fell asleep, her head on his chest, his arms wrapped around her, just as they had on their wedding night so many years ago. The years continued their steady march. Sarah became a teacher, just as she had planned, taking over Olivia's position when Olivia finally retired fully. Owen married a girl from a neighboring ranch, a strong, smart young woman named Rebecca, and they gave Fletcher and Olivia their first grandchildren, twin boys who were as wild and energetic as Owen had been at that age. James did go to San Francisco to study art, and though Fletcher had worried about losing him, James came back after 2 years with a wife, a gentle soul named Margaret who painted alongside him, and they built a small house on the edge of the property where they could work in peace while still being close to family. Clara, true to her nature, surprised everyone by running off at 19 with a traveling preacher. Fletcher was furious, but Olivia counseled patience. "She is young and headstrong like we both were once," she told Fletcher. "Let her make her own mistakes and find her own way. She will come back to us when she is ready." Sure enough, Clara returned 6 months later, sadder but wiser, having discovered that the preacher was more interested in what was in church collection plates than in actual spiritual work. She settled back into life at the ranch and eventually married a rancher from Bishop, a good man who adored her despite, or perhaps because of, her wild spirit. In 1910, Fletcher and Olivia celebrated their 27th anniversary surrounded by their children and grandchildren. The house was overflowing with people, and the noise level was tremendous, but Fletcher and Olivia would not have had it any other way. Late in the evening, after most people had left or gone to bed, Fletcher found Olivia standing on the porch, looking up at the stars. He came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist, resting his chin on her shoulder. "Tired?" he asked. "Exhausted," Olivia admitted. "But happy. So happy, Fletcher. Look at what we built. 4 children, all grown and happy and thriving. 7 grandchildren so far, with more probably on the way. A ranch that is successful and sustainable, a life that matters." "All because a diary fell out of a stagecoach," Fletcher marveled. "No," Olivia said, turning in his arms to face him. "All because you picked it up. All because you read it. All because you wrote back. You could have just left it there, or picked it up and thrown it away, or returned it without reading it. But you did not. You engaged with my words, with my heart, and you let yourself be vulnerable enough to respond. That is what made all of this possible." Fletcher kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. "I love you, Olivia Ford. After 27 years, I love you more than ever." "I love you too," Olivia said, "always and forever." They stood together under the stars, just as they had so many times before, and Fletcher thought about the boy he had been when he found that diary, lonely and guarded, and convinced he would always be alone. He thought about how wrong he had been, how one moment of curiosity and courage had changed everything. Inside the house, on the mantel, the diaries sat in a row, a dozen of them now, chronicling nearly 3 decades of a life lived together. They had filled page after page with their thoughts and feelings, their hopes and fears, their daily observations and profound realizations. Those diaries were a map of their journey together, a testament to their love. Fletcher knew that someday, probably not too far in the future, he and Olivia would be gone, and those diaries would pass to their children and grandchildren. They would read the words and come to understand the love story that had created their family. They would see how their grandmother had written letters to a husband she had never met, how their grandfather had found those letters and written back, how two lonely people had found each other against all odds and built something beautiful together. And maybe, Fletcher hoped, those diaries would inspire the next generations to take chances on love, to be vulnerable enough to open their hearts, to believe that even when everything seems impossible, love can find a way. But that was for the future. For now, there was just this moment, this night, this life they had built together. And it was enough. It was more than enough. It was everything. Years passed in their steady rhythm. Fletcher and Olivia grew older. Their hair turned completely white. Their bodies moved more slowly, but their love remained as strong as ever. They watched their grandchildren grow up and start families of their own. They celebrated more anniversaries, marked more milestones, created more memories. On a warm afternoon in May 1915, Olivia was working in her garden, something she had taken up in her later years. She loved growing vegetables and flowers, loved the feel of dirt under her fingernails and the satisfaction of nurturing life. Fletcher came out to find her, moving carefully with the cane he now needed for his bad leg, a souvenir from a horse-related accident a few years back. "Olivia, could you come inside for a moment? There is something I want to show you." Olivia brushed off her hands and followed Fletcher into the house. He led her to their bedroom where he had spread out all of their diaries on the bed, chronologically arranged. "What is this?" Olivia asked, though she had a suspicion. "I have been thinking," Fletcher said. "We are not getting any younger, and I want to make sure that when we are gone, our story does not get lost. I want to make sure our children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren know how we started, why we matter. Fletcher, they know. We have told them the story 100 times. I know, but I want them to have more than just our memories. I want them to have your words, my words, our words together. So I have been thinking we should give these diaries to Owen to keep safe, with instructions that they are to be shared with the whole family, passed down through the generations." Olivia sat down on the bed, running her hands over the worn leather covers. "These diaries contain our whole lives together. Every dream, every fear, every moment of joy and sorrow." "Exactly," Fletcher said, sitting beside her. "And I want that preserved. I want them to know that real love exists, that it is possible to build something lasting and true." Olivia leaned against Fletcher's shoulder. "You are right. Let us give them to Owen with the instructions that they are to be treasured and shared. Our legacy is not just the land we built up or the children we raised. It is also the love we shared, the life we created together." They called Owen over that evening and presented him with the diaries, explaining their importance and their wishes for how they should be preserved. Owen, a man in his 30s now with children of his own, accepted the responsibility with appropriate gravity. "I will take good care of them," he promised. "And I will make sure everyone in the family knows the story, knows how you two found each other. It is a story worth preserving." In the fall of 1918, Fletcher fell ill with pneumonia. He was 71 years old, and while he had been relatively healthy for his age, the illness hit him hard. Dr. Harrison, now quite old himself but still practicing, did what he could, but it became clear that Fletcher's body was simply worn out, ready to rest. Olivia barely left his side during those weeks. She sat by his bed, holding his hand, reading to him from the diaries, reminding him of all the moments they had shared. Their children came, bringing grandchildren and great-grandchildren to say goodbye. The house was full of family, just as Fletcher and Olivia had always wanted. On a quiet morning in October, with Olivia holding his hand and Owen standing at the foot of the bed, Fletcher opened his eyes and looked at his wife with perfect clarity. "Olivia," he whispered, his voice barely audible. Thank you for everything, for loving me, for building this life with me, for being exactly who you said you would be in that diary." Tears streamed down Olivia's face. "I love you, Fletcher Ford. I have loved you from the moment I read your note in my diary. I will love you forever." "Forever," Fletcher echoed, and then he smiled, that same smile that had made Olivia's heart skip a beat when she first met him over 30 years ago. "Tell our story, Olivia. Make sure they know that love is worth fighting for, worth believing in." "I will," Olivia promised. "I will." Fletcher squeezed her hand one more time, took a breath, and then peacefully let it go. He died with his beloved wife holding his hand, surrounded by the family they had created together, in the house they had built on land they had worked side by side to make prosper. Olivia grieved deeply for Fletcher. They had been together for nearly 36 years, and his absence left a hole in her life that could never be filled. But she did not fall apart. She had promised him she would tell their story, and she intended to keep that promise. She lived for 7 more years after Fletcher's death, staying active and engaged with her family. She spent time with her children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, telling them stories about Fletcher, about their life together, about the diary that had started it all. She added entries to the final diary, writing letters to Fletcher even though he was gone, because the habit of communicating with him on the page was too ingrained to break. On December 20th, 1925, exactly 44 years after her wedding day, Olivia passed away peacefully in her sleep. She was 72 years old. Her family found her in bed with the original diary clutched to her chest, open to the page where Fletcher had written his first note to her so many decades ago. They buried her next to Fletcher on a hillside overlooking the ranch, with a simple stone that read, "Olivia Warren Ford, 1852–1925. Beloved wife, mother, grandmother. She kept a diary for a husband she hadn't met. He found it and wrote her back." The diaries were passed to Owen, as Fletcher and Olivia had wished, and Owen took his responsibility seriously. He had special boxes made to protect them, and he organized family gatherings where he would read entries aloud, sharing his parents' story with the younger generations. The tradition continued through the years. Owen's children read the diaries, and their children after them. Each generation came to understand where they came from, came to appreciate the love story that had created their family. They learned about hope and vulnerability, and the courage it takes to open your heart to another person. They learned that love is not just a feeling but a choice, made every day in 1,000 small ways. The ranch continued to operate, passed down through the Ford family. Fletcher and Olivia's descendants worked the land, raised cattle, built homes and lives in the Owens Valley. And always, the diaries remained preserved and cherished, a reminder of where it all began. Sometimes, late at night, when the stars were particularly bright, family members would take the diaries out to the place where Fletcher had first found Olivia's journal. They would sit in that spot and read entries aloud, and it almost felt like Fletcher and Olivia were there with them, still writing their story across the years, still showing that love could bridge any distance, overcome any obstacle. Because that was the truth at the heart of those worn leather journals. Love was not just about finding the right person, though Fletcher and Olivia had certainly found each other. Love was about choosing to be vulnerable, choosing to hope, choosing to believe that somewhere out there was someone who would see you and love you for exactly who you were. It was about taking risks and being brave, and never giving up on the possibility of connection. Olivia had started writing her diary when she was 18 years old, pouring her heart onto pages that she thought no one would ever read. She had written to an imaginary husband, creating a relationship with someone who did not exist. And then, Through a combination of chance and choice, those words had found their way to Fletcher, a lonely cowboy who decided to write back. That single decision, that moment of courage when Fletcher put pencil to paper and responded to Olivia's words, had changed everything. It had created a family that now numbered in the dozens, had built a legacy that would continue for generations. All because two people had been brave enough to be honest about what they wanted, what they hoped for, what they dreamed of. The diaries remained, preserved and treasured, a map of two lives intertwined, two hearts that had found each other across impossible distances and built something beautiful together. And in those pages, Fletcher and Olivia lived on, their love story never ending, always inspiring, forever reminding their descendants that real love exists, that it is worth fighting for, and that sometimes the most extraordinary things begin with the simplest acts of courage and hope. In the Owens Valley, where the Sierra Nevada mountains rise dramatically against the sky and the land stretches wide and beautiful, the Ford family continues to thrive. They work the land, raise their children, build their lives. And always, in a place of honor, the diaries sit waiting, ready to tell their story to anyone who will listen, ready to remind each new generation that love is the greatest adventure of all, and that every love story, no matter how it begins, has the potential to become legendary.